Hello, Facebook, bookers, those of the beautiful faces of the world. Hello. I'm not going to give anybody room to come in. You'll see it, you won't see it, you'll catch it later. Not on live, that's fine. So here I am another Sunday. And I wasn't certain where I was going to go today, what topic I was going to discuss. The last couple of weeks I've been talking about things related to the anniversaries in my month of May's. For those that have been catching my Sunday lives, I've been talking about the book that's coming out that's postponed until 2021, Dismantling Daddy Dysfunctions. And today I want to continue that conversation. We kind of talked about the light work that you have to do for yourself, but I want to dig a little deeper in that and talk about some transformative work and healing the inner child. So if you watched the live last week, you know that I talked probably about an hour about my relationship with my father, who is now deceased 19 years, and kind of what that looked like for me and how that impacted and affected relationships that I have been involved in. And so now that I've done the light work on that relationship, I had to look at the inner child. What did that child experience? What did that child go through? What lies did that child believe? And that child being me. Like, you know, sometimes we're frozen in those traumas. And then when we deal with them, we have to speak to that inner child. We have to give love and light and life back to that child and apologize to that child and find forgiveness for that child. And it's not hard per se. If you're aware of those things, it's not terribly easy though. Because the ownership is not necessarily yours. But when you have someone who you may never see again, you may never talk to again, or they've passed on or they're deceased, you have to still heal that inner child, especially because we're adults. And so for me, it was going back to my 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-year-old self. And just saying, you know, what would you have said to your younger self if you could have imparted messages to her then? Because now as an adult, I wonder, you know, and I said this last week on my live, you know, why didn't he stick around long enough for me? You know, why didn't he choose me? So anyone who follows my relationship podcast, Mars and Venus, hears me say things like, in relationships, stick around long enough to choose us. Talking about women, Black women specifically, because a lot of us grow up without men in our lives, aka our fathers, who didn't stick around long enough to choose us, to invest in us, to show us that we were loved and valued and cared for. So I had to speak to this inner child, and I had to remind this inner child that there was nothing that she could have done. She wasn't responsible. She wasn't the deciding factor as to why her dad left her. And that's a hard conversation. And so I had mentioned last week that in my seminary days, we did this project. So anybody watching this live or later, you might want to grab a pen and some paper, because I'm going to challenge you to do the work as well. I think it's important. I think it's transformative. I think it's healing. I think it brings about a change in you. And now if you're not willing to do the work today, still take the notes. And when you're ready to touch bases with them, do the work. And so I went through this process in one of my seminary classes. And they said from the time you were born until current day, write down every significant point in your life. Once you have written down every significant point in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, the in-between, attach to it a star or a scar and give a description note about it. So I touched base on this last week, and I said, you know, after I did the assignment, or at least the outline of the assignment, I sat in those feelings, because some of those significant moments as a child brought up memories and feelings and discussions with myself that I hadn't even tapped into for 10, 15, 20 years. And so then with those feelings and those memories, it started becoming a, you know, how are you patterning other relationships? What does some of the things in your lifeline tell you about what you're doing now? Because the whole goal was to look at this blueprint of what you've gone through, because we're shaped and we're molded by our experiences and our environment and our parents and our siblings and our relationships. And so a couple of the things, and I'll give you guys examples because this is not in the book, so you're getting some free introspection of self from me. One of, and I have mentioned this on Facebook before, so this is nothing new to some. One of the scars that I put on there was when I was in 6th grade. The guy, and you know, good and well, he ain't supposed to have no boyfriend in 6th grade, but the guy that I was seeing in my head, real life, we were dating in our minds, and in practice, he and I and a whole bunch of other people were walking home from school, and he and I were the last two on the long leg of the journey because I lived the furthest away from the school. And I remember he had said something, and I might have like told him to be quiet, or I popped him on his arm or something. So we ended up like play wrestling it on the ground. And so he pinned me down to the ground and he touched me inappropriately. I had on clothes. I remember somebody had pulled up and was like, yo, do you need help? And, you know, as a kid, I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm trying to get him off of me. And I'm like, don't talk to me. I hate you. You know, the kid, normal kid banter. And so when I got home, you know, that feeling of not necessarily guilt or shame, it was just like, what happened right in that moment that he thought that that was okay? And so I remember I didn't share it with my mom because, one, I thought I was gonna get in trouble. And two, I didn't know if in that moment it was a safe space to share it, because like I said, I thought I was gonna get in trouble and I didn't want to get in trouble. So I remember going back to school, and I had engaged my school counselor. We were talking about something, and she was like, oh, well, you can come to my office. And we were talking about something unrelated to that. And she was like, and I don't know if it was immediately the day after or the week after or whatever, but I ended up explaining to her what had happened. I walked her through the events leading up to him pinning me down and touching me inappropriately. And it became a realization that that wasn't okay in bigger terms. And so she was like, well, I'm going to have to call your mom. And you know, she called my mom, and my mom was like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, you know, the standard pat answer of, I don't know. Sorry, I'm looking back because it sounds like my dog is in something he ain't got no business being in. And so I remember the conversation around it, because then it became this really big thing, big to the point where, the police were notified, and charges were pressed, and it was just like, it was huge. It was bigger than me at that point. And I remember that being towards the end of the school year, so we were moving into junior high at this point. So by the time we got into junior high, and prior to us getting actually to the physical building, I remember some of the girls who were mutual friends with the both of us were like, well, I don't know why you lying on him like that. And I can't believe that you would do that to him, and blah, blah. I mean, just, it was so disgusting. And I realized then that I don't need people like that in my corner, because I need you to be able to believe what I'm saying. I need you to believe me. I need you to support that what is happening to me is not okay. And so, he ended up having to go to court, and I wasn't asked to be there. I didn't have to testify. I had a written statement, and they accepted that and moved on. And he did get some things that did happen to him in that process, but I remember that scar specifically because of how other people tried to make me feel. And so when I started unpacking the emotion and the guilt and shame because of other people's imposing of those things, and not necessarily mine, because I knew in that moment I had done nothing wrong. It wasn't an issue of, well, maybe I should have asked the people who had stopped to help me. It wasn't, I didn't think of it in that manner, because that wasn't the concern. It was like, I didn't do anything wrong for him to behave in that manner. And because he chose to behave in that manner, I wasn't oblivious to the fact that it's a learned behavior. So he either saw it somewhere or engaged in some type of discussion or observation of it. So because he didn't just come in his head and say, oh my gosh, this is who I'm going to be, this is how I'm going to act. At least that's what I thought at that age. And so when I was writing this scar and star down, and then I'll get to a star in a minute. When I was writing the scar down, and I was writing, the age, the grade, the experience, and the emotion attached to, I started speaking to that child, that 12-year-old little girl, and saying, this was not your fault. And I was reminding myself of those things at that age, but sometimes you don't necessarily apply it. You hear it, you believe it, but you don't necessarily put it into practice. So I knew that I didn't do anything wrong, but there was still some level of, well, what could I have done differently? And so here I am in my 20s saying, you did nothing wrong. You don't have to carry the shame or the guilt of that situation. And this was, I remember posting about it on Facebook, probably roughly around when the Me Too movement got its big push, because we were sharing stories of solidarity with each other across this platform to say that you are not alone. This is not a story that's isolated. These things happen to other people. And so doing that light work with my inner child and telling her that, if no one else believed her, I did. If no one else knew that she deserved more for herself, I knew it. And if she didn't remember anything else from the outcome of that, is that you are worthy of healthy touch and healthy love and healthy interactions, and that no one should be using their hands as a way to hurt, harm, or hinder you. And so that was one of the things I did in this example of scars and stars. And so I'll share a star with you. And so and this is probably my favorite star in this time frame. When my father was diagnosed with leukemia and went into the hospital and had eventually had been told, this is what's going to happen. He's going to have hospice, and he decided to go home being his sister's house, and couldn't act right. So he ended up back in the hospital. I would go up there every day, or at least enough to spend more time there than I did at home. And so I remember one day, we were in his hospital room and we were having a conversation, and I was a part of the youth ministry at my church. So we were heavy into youth group meetings and youth group activities and youth group weekends and all these youth day, very invested in that. That was a good part of what made me thrive as a teenager. And I remember talking to my dad, and I had just asked him, a question. And I was like, so Dad, if you die today, how sure are you that you're going to heaven? And I'll never forget, he was like, I'm not so sure. And I was like, well, do you want to be sure? Now, mind you, I was young. Evangelism wasn't my thing. I never led nobody to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ in my entire life. So I'm sitting here. I've always been bold and courageous and audacious. That's just, my mom always says, where'd I get you from? But something was pressing on my heart to have that conversation. So I remember calling what I would like to call my spiritual parents. So I called the Neils, and I think I might have talked to Mama Karen. And if y'all watch this video, y'all may remember this. But I talked to one of them, and I was like, yo, I need help right now. My dad would like to pray, because I asked him if he wanted to pray. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I don't really know what I'm doing. So let me make this phone call real quick and get some advice so that I can give you the tools that you need so we can do this. So they basically walked me through the conversation on the phone. And so when I got off the phone with them, I was able to pray with him and see him acknowledge that he was a human being, a man with sin, and he wanted Jesus into his life, and he believed that Jesus was his Lord and Savior, and that he, lived this earth 33 years, walked amongst people, died for our sins on the cross, and he rose again. Like, I was like, here I am, 17 or 18 years old, trying to usher this man into the glory of God. And I remember after we prayed, the look in his eyes, and it was all hindsight, because writing that down, I was like, when he kicked me out of his hospital room the day he died, he was at peace. Now, I wasn't at peace, because I was like, why are you leaving me, man? But he was at peace. And that, remembering that, because it would have been, the death part of it would have been the scar, but that became the star even amidst that, because I was like, we don't always know if people are going to be on the other side of eternity with us. But that for me was tangible. We had this conversation. He was moved. You could see that lift of the uncovering, the unveiling of him, if you will. And so that was a huge star for me. It was like, if I never lead anybody else to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, shame on me. But if I never do, this is a win. This is a win because of his lifestyle choices, because of who he was, because of past behaviors. I was like, this is huge. And so I had to remind myself that God gives you everything you need. He equips you. I had to remind that 17, 18-year-old me that you had everything you needed within you to have that conversation. And you had the resources and the people beside you who were going to encourage you and cheer you on to make those good, healthy, viable decisions. You were loved and supported in that direction. And so it brought good fruit to be able to speak to that part of me. And it's like, even with all the good or bad that you experience, count it all joy. And so I took every scar and star and I let it marinate in my spirit. I spoke to every corner of my life, and a lot of tears, a lot of laughs, a lot of residual, which is why I said healing is so important. Because sometimes if you're not looking at the things that hurt you, you can't fix them and heal you. And so even some of the things that I masked as good things, hey Corey, long time no see. Even the things that I would mask as good things because, hey, I'm not dead. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Those kind of mentalities. I was like, some of these things I needed to address with myself. Some of these things I needed to ask myself, how did that person, me being that person, how did you at that age, how did you feel? Who was in your corner? Who did you feel like was supportive of you when you were going through these things? And then I had to remind myself of, now that you know these things, can you be the light for other people who are still in darkness? Because we don't always want to do the work, but we know it's important to do the work. We know that it's transformative. And so what I said about taking out your pen and your paper, I challenge each one of you to write down your life from birth till now. Matter of fact, I'm not saying it because I'm not doing it. My accountability partner and I have decided that it's a good project to do now. She has some life experiences that are pressing to her heart, and I have, some directive things that are going on in my life that I want to map out, because it's been about 12 years since I did that initial project. We want to map out these things and look over some things, and I need to speak to the last 12 years of my life and speak to the younger me and have conversations and unpack how I felt, the pains, the gains, and the in-between. And so I challenge you to write down your scars and your stars. Find someone who will be accountable with you so that you have a safe space to unpack those things. And then if you don't have someone, be okay to unpack it with yourself and speak to your inner child. Speak to your younger self. Talk to yourself in a way that is a balm to the healing that needs to take place. Speak to yourself in a way that you can hold yourself to the light and keep you there, because at the end of the day, everything that you've experienced has helped shape and mold who you are today. And so I always tell people, you are not the sum total of what has happened to you, but it is just a part of your journey that has helped shape or mold you, how you act and interact, how you engage, how you retreat. All of those things are stemming from your environment, your experience, and your relationships. And so, talking about scars and stars, some of us don't have a whole lot of scars. Some of us don't have a whole lot of stars, but be honest, be reflective, say a prayer before you start and say, let everything that has happened in my life come to remembrance. Because sometimes we gloss over memories. Sometimes we are safeguarding them because of the trauma that it may have caused. But I remember sitting in myself. I remember having the conversation with myself before I started that assignment and saying, God, if you see fit for things that I may have missed or I may have suppressed, and I mean, I suppressed, not necessarily suppressed, but hadn't spoken about some things that had happened in my life when I used to steal as a kid from the corner store off of Ames Avenue. And the time I got caught, I put those on there. There were things that I just had to put on there. And for some people, it's like, oh, I wouldn't even have thought about that. It's like I put everything on this assignment. I remember my teacher's comment was, your vivid, colorful, expressive descriptions of everything that you've experienced, and then your thought process. He's like, how thoughtful of you to engage yourself now to your person then. And that wasn't even a part of the assignment. He didn't say you had to engage your younger self. He just wanted us to look over our life and see the hand of God and the face of God. Because again, this is seminary. So there was some definitive reason why he wanted us to do this assignment. I took it a step further and said, let me talk to my inner child. Because it was apparent once this assignment started that there was some emotional and residual damage or hurt or frustration or anger or whatever it was that I was carrying all those years. And so I challenge everyone to start engaging those things. Like last week, I said I would probably come up with 3 points if I kept this conversation going. So I do have 3 points. I made my bestie who is on here, and hey Kim, hey Tammy, be so proud of me. I jotted some notes down. So I got my 3 points together. So I promise I will not take too much of y'all time. And so going back to what the topic is for this live, healing your inner child. For me, a lot of the things that happened to me didn't just happen because of my father. They didn't just happen because of our relationship. they were probably, how they were unpacked might have stemmed from that relationship. But the relationship within other relationships, the one with that gentleman in the 6th grade, the first time I engaged in a romantic relationship in high school, and just different things like that. And so the unpacking of those and the engagement of myself as I got older and talking to my younger self, it allowed me over this assignment to basically look at the patterns, the behaviors that existed. Not that I would ever blame myself for any of the things that happened to me, because I wouldn't say that at all, ever. But it allowed me to formulate and then articulate through this assignment how I wanted to engage other people moving forward. What I knew wasn't good for relationships, because at that point in my life, I had desired more authentic relationships with other people, but you have to first pour that authenticity into yourself, which means you have to do some light work, because if you're in darkness, you aren't being authentic with anyone. And so uncovering all those dark places was important to me. Which is why I tend to be a little nuanced to some people, because I am definitely one to say, hey, you are getting the real deal Holyfield. Like, I'm not a monopoly, I'm not an anomaly, I'm not any of those things, but I am going to be genuinely myself. And I receive criticism well, even though I don't necessarily like it, but I know that is how we grow into our better versions of ourselves. Like I said last week, we're an evolving people. And so I commission each and every one of you to take these 3 points into consideration when you are doing this work, when you are attempting to walk down the alleyway of your scars and the pathway of your stars of your life, to take these 3 things into consideration. So the first one is speak to the darkness by shining the light on it. Those scars, what are they? What kind of wounds and what kind of pains do they leave? Sometimes I look at some of the scars, physical scars that I have on my body, and they bring up a memory. I have this scar, and I now have a tattoo over it, but I have this scar on my arm, and it looks like the size of a dime. And I remember my cousin's curling iron was on, and it was February 13th, 1998, I believe. And I remember that because somebody died and somebody broke up with me. But I remember her iron fell off the dresser and hit my arm, and it was just this big nasty boil of a bubble. And it eventually got popped by another friend who grabbed my arm at a party after it had boiled and bubbled over, and it left a scar. And then I eventually got a tattoo over it. But what kind of memories does it cause when you look at it? What kind of pains? Because some of our scars are raised. Some of our scars didn't heal well. And so attending to those by shining the light on those dark places in our lives will allow you to address the emotions that are residual in that and hopefully heal from that by unpacking it. And then once you've shined the light on it, point 2 is heal what hurt you. Mind you, I didn't say heal who hurt you. Heal what hurt you. So that means you have to invest in that light work for yourself by doing an inspection, an introspection, a reflection of what actually went wrong in that moment. You can't heal the person who did something to you, but you can heal the inner child in you that may be affected or afflicted by it still, because a lot of us still carry trauma that we haven't touched, tapped, or talked about since ever. And don't use your hurts in that to say that's just who I am. Being a hurt person is not attractive. Being a hurt person is not beneficial for the relationships that you engage in on a regular and consistent basis. At the age of majority, which most of us are at that point, you can't continually use that excuse. Well, this is just who I am, or this is what happened to me, and there's nothing I can do about it. That's a falsehood. There's absolutely something you can do about it. You can't change who did it to you, but you can change how your adult self responds. Excuse me. And if it happened to your adult life, or if it's happening now, you can change how you respond and react to it by speaking life into yourself, by shining a light on the darkness, by not putting skeletons back in the closet, by not being afraid of the ghosts that hide under your bed. And that's a literal statement a figurative statement for literal things that are causing disruptions and discord in your life. You can speak to those things and find healing for them, but you have to be willing to shine light on those dark places. It's not easy, which is why I said last week, get you a safe space, get you a safe place, and if you can, get you a safe person to do the work with. And if not, you'll be like me doing that scars and SARS assignment, and you will be doing the work for yourself. But the reward, oh my gosh, the reward is so amazing. And once you have exposed it, brought the darkness to light, and you have healed what hurt you, now you need to connect with other forces in the world that dare to see light lead the way. Because you don't want to engage with other people who are in dark places. Now, you can be a safe space for them to do their light work, but you don't want all your friends to be darkness rather. So you want other light agents to be in your life, accountability partners. They help you develop authentic relationships. They help you continually evolve and grow. They help you hold yourself to the light and keep you there. And Sandy, I love what you just wrote. The pain that you feel now will be the venom you pour into others if you don't heal soon. Absolutely. And I used to say that, if you don't heal yourself, and I liken it to broken people, like shards of glass, you will cut up good people in your life who didn't deserve it, who knew nothing about it, who didn't do it to you. And we create these cycles of other broken people. So we just all going around cutting up each other, and we wonder why it's a massacre of bloody bodies all over the place, trying to be in relationships, being broken, and can't build nothing together. You can't build nothing together because you're broken. You got to build yourself. You got to pour into you before you can pour into others. But whatever cup you pour out of, whether it's your healing or your hurt, that manifestation of is going to affect other people. Your life doesn't happen in a vacuum, and no man is an island. So other people are going to feel the residual of that, whether it's interest or debt. And it's not fair to someone else that you haven't chosen to do the work. So definitely get you some people, follow someone who is speaking what they've been through and doing the work or has done the work. And like I said last week, we are an evolving people. So there may be other things that come up in your life that require you to do further work. But once you lay the groundwork, it'll be easier to do more work because you already know what it requires of you. Accepting that we are flawed is one thing. Walking in the newness that we are still fearfully and wonderfully made in spite of those flaws is another. And so you have to speak to yourself in a manner that reminds you of what you are, not what has happened to you. Which is why I always say, if you say to yourself, who am I? It's not what happened to you. It's who you truly are. Are you a kind person? Are you a person of integrity, a person of good character, a person of a good moral compass? You love to travel. You love to engage people. You love to do, public speaking engagements. You like to make cards. You like to do dance therapy. You like to walk dogs. All of those things are amazing. But a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, I'm a suicide survivor. That is amazing because you survived it. But that is not the totality of who you are. That is something that happened to you. That is a moment in your life journey that has affected or afflicted or compounded what you've become and set you on a path in your trajectory that's like maybe astounded you. And there's nothing wrong with using that as a foundation to explain to other people, I am a suicide survivor. Not me personally. This is the example I'm using. But I am a suicide survivor who. Then you go into further, who am I? And explain and expose who you are so that people can glean from that. Because there may be another suicide survivor in the audience. There may be another person who's been contemplating committing suicide. And they may need to hear that. But the part that comes after that comma, because you don't ever want it to just be a period. I'm a suicide survivor, period. Well, what else? Like, what happened? How did you get there? Who are you? So having that conversation, exposing that darkness, shining a light on it, healing the work, which is so essential. And then getting around people who you can glean from and allowing people to in turn glean from you, because things don't just happen to us for us. Things happen to us for other people. And the more comfortable we get in sharing our life's journey and our story with other people about having these conversations and not being afraid to expose the darkness because we're petrified that we'll be seen as different or we'll be judged for this behavior or whatever the case may be. It allows other people the permission to do the same. We don't have to keep things hidden. You keep things hidden, you'll never heal. You keep things hidden, you'll always hurt. And that's not who we want to be as an evolved people. That's not who I want to be as an evolved person. And so I try to engage people, which is why I'm so passionate about relationships and the authenticity of them and being transparent and not being a surface-minded person. You need to go deeper. And people, figuratively, you can't swim, or literally even, you can't swim. That's okay, because in this relationship, there isn't water per se that you're going to drown from. You're in a safe space where you can be vulnerable. It is a risk, but trusting someone to honor that vulnerability, to hold a mirror to who you have been, where you have gone, and where you desire to go moving forward is important, because that's where growth happens. That's where the knowledge of who I was and the cheering on of how far I've come. We used to sing in church. I may not look like, what I've been through. And I hear people posting that all the time. And I can even say, we say all the time, and lightly or not lightly, we're in a pandemic. Yes, we're in a pandemic. But do not use that or any other thing that comes into our lives that's overwhelming, because life will always happen and it may always overwhelm, to not do the healing work for yourself. You may not heal another relationship with another person. You may not heal, or restore a position at work. But you can heal your inner child. You can speak to your younger self. You can do the unpacking of the problems or the pain or the pest of your past that have kept you trapped to these conditions of trauma. We don't have to feel these ways anymore. We don't have to experience this hurt anymore. We don't have to excuse it for, oh, well, that's just what so-and-so did, and that's just who so-and-so was. That's who so-and-so chose to be. And they chose to be that way, which unfortunately may have affected me. So now what am I going to do with what has happened to me? And how am I going to hold myself to the light and keep me there while I do the healing work? Because that is what is going to propel you into relationships that are healthy, that are functioning, that are that are considered good for you. Because when we don't do the healing work, we tend to attract other people who might be broken. And then we wonder why there's a toxicness in this relationship, or we wonder why so and so acted this way to me and, you know, continually cussed me out or talked down to me or belittled me or called me fat or called me ugly. Those levels of abuse, like, those things are not happening because they've never happened before. They're happening because sometimes we haven't looked at past trauma, pain, or hurt and said, this is not okay. And now that I know this is not okay, what can I sow into myself so that when I see this again, I know to run. I know not to fall. Like last week I said, we do not fall in love with people. We fall in love with their potential. We fell in love with their project, because sometimes we see so much more in a person than what is actually presented. And that's not a bad thing until it's a bad thing. You know, sometimes we allow people to stay on our lives longer than necessary, and then we wonder why we keep cycling in and out of history. Because if we don't address it, attend to it, become aware of it, we are bound to repeat it. Which is why I dated a lot of emotionally unavailable men, because my father was emotionally unavailable and I didn't do the light work until later in life. And so, wrapping this up, because I've hit all three of my points, praise ye the Lord, I just challenge each and every one of you, lovely people, to acknowledge that you are not the sum total of what has happened to you, that what has happened to you does not define your life's work. And now that you know that, you can do the light work. And so get your pens out, papers out, notebooks out, journals out, and do the scars and stars task work. Write down everything in your life that you may have had experienced and attach things to it. What is this, a scar? Is this a star? How did it make you feel? And then if you have the courage and the audaciousness to speak to that inner child, tell that inner child that, you know, it is okay to grieve this part of your life. It is okay to mourn this relationship. Now find joy in that process, because that's what I've had to remind myself. Even though things may have hurt me, they may have hindered me, they may have held me back, I have to count it all joy, because I am not destroyed because of it. You know, it's the idea of being burned in a fire or being born, baptized from the fire. And so I have come out of a fire a better person, a more loving and lovable individual, less selfish, more self-care minded, and have made it my mission work to be a life and a light for other people to do the same. We don't have to live in darkness if we don't want to, but we have to trust that somebody else knows where the light is. And so on this Sunday evening, and I'm later than I normally have been, I think I came on an hour later than normal, I just want to say, on the eve of Memorial Day, bring things to your memory that may be uncomfortable. Let them stir you to a place of doing the work. And if you need to speak with someone in your church, a therapist, an accountability partner, a friend, if you need to talk to someone and ask them to forgive you or seek forgiveness, if you need to compensate someone because you may have harmed them in any way, all those things may come to your remembrance. And when they do, answer each and every one. Be kind enough to yourself to say, we can heal from this. We can overcome from these things. Write it out, laugh it out, cry it out, but don't ignore it. Otherwise, you'll come back 20 years later and say, I wish I would have did this work. I'm here for each and every one of you. Know that I love you. Know that I will continue to hold the banner up on your behalf, because like I said, dismantling daddy dysfunctions, and all the men I loved after him, that book isn't just in honor of my dad. It isn't just for me. It is for everyone who needs to see that we can dismantle every dysfunctional relationship, even the one we have in our mind with ourselves. And I empower you and I implore you to seek the understanding of yourself enough to break down those walls and those barriers. If you need to ask me any questions, if there's a topic you'd like me to unpack, because for the next year, I'm going to get real personal. So I want y'all to know that I'm not exposing myself for, sympathy or, anything like that. I'm exposing myself because God led me to this conversation. God led me to write this book. God led me to this place because and many of my friends have said it, that work is going to bring healing for many other people. And I wholeheartedly believe that. And so when people ask me, you're not a New York best-selling author yet, I don't know if that's necessarily what I want. What I want is to write things that make people feel something, make people really investigate who they are at the very core. When you strip away the pretty face and the makeup and the nice beard and the flesh and bones, and you get down to the mire, the muck, just the soul of who you are, the depth. Who are you? What have you gone through that has led you to this total version of yourself? And how are you doing the work so that you can continue to evolve into the best version of yourself? We never will arrive on this side of eternity, so you might as well get invested in doing the work. And that's why I write what I write, and I do what I do for that reason. And so, love you all. I wish I could hug each and every one of you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And if you have any questions about Scars and Stars, or you may need an accountability partner for that, please reach out to me. You can catch me here on Facebook, message, Instagram. All of my platforms are Shannon Ford-Jefferson. Don't really check Twitter, but I will engage it if you do use that one. I would love to walk alongside that journey with you. Stars and Scars is revolutionary, which is why I'm doing it for a second time with another friend. But challenge yourselves. And if you feel any way by what you're reading or hearing in the comments or just through my commentary, sit in that for a little longer and unpack it in pen, on paper, via your voice recorder on your phone, and sit in your own emotional stupor and just let it marinate. Because your inner child may be knocking on the door saying, I need you to come in and talk to me. I need you to come in and give me a hug. I need you to come in and wrap your arms around me and say, even though you were singular alone, you are no longer alone, and we are going to heal together, because that is where true transformative relationships begin. And that's where you can start engaging in more authentic relationships, not just with yourself, but with others. So the night is young. It is 10:30 here in Florida. And yes, I am still at work. So I will see you guys next week. I want to give y'all a sneak peek of what next week is, but I will tell you now, bring your tissue, bring your notebook, and bring your pen. Because although today's work was optional, next week's is not. So just trust that I am doing this just for myself, just for the sake of doing it for everybody else who may come across this and need it. Share it if you feel so inclined. But I will catch y'all around this time next week. Have a good week. Happy Memorial Day. And again, I love you all. Bye.